Okay, so this video was inspired by this Reddit post right here that talks about what the Grizzlies have been doing in terms of the buyout market and how it's quite interesting because four of the 31 players that the Lakers have on guaranteed deals over the last 3 seasons, and that includes the upcoming season, are players that the Grizzlies bought out and eventually ended up going to the Lakers. And so it got people thinking and it got people talking as to what the Grizzlies are actually doing and what is it that their strategy actually entails. And I wasn't sure what it was in the beginning. I thought the Grizzlies were just, you know, buying out players that didn't really want to play for them. So much like they did with Iguodala, much like they did with other players. And so I thought to myself, this is not really a story that's worth talking about. So I looked a bit more into it. And shout out to some of the Redditors that commented and, left out some very key information, some key context that were really missed when reading the articles talking about this. So when you look at the list, the four players that were bought out by the Grizzlies over the years, you have Avery Bradley, you have Dwight Howard, you have Dion Waiters, and then you have Rajon Rondo recently being bought out. And now people are talking and people are saying, well, the Grizzlies are just being a bad team. They're just buying out players that don't like to be on the Grizzlies because, well, they just don't fit with the system that the Grizzlies are building here. Well, in that case, why did the Grizzlies acquire them in the first place, right? So you have to ask yourself, what were the Grizzlies thinking when they traded for them or acquired them via contract deals or whatnot? And the answer is not as obvious as you would think. Now, context needs to be added, okay? Because the Grizzlies have saved up a lot of money in these buyouts, okay? The front office that they have over there in Memphis can be said to be a very smart front office, okay? So what they did with Dwight Howard was very interesting. So they traded CJ Miles to acquire Dwight Howard, and CJ Miles was on an $8.7 million contract. And Dwight Howard was on a $5.6 million contract when he was traded. And that saved them already $3.1 million. But then later on, the Grizzlies then bought out Dwight Howard for $3 million, which meant that they had saved $2.6 million from the initial $5.6 million contract that he was on. So now you see that they went from paying CJ Miles $8.7 million to now ending up paying somebody $3 million, which is a net $5.7 million saving. Okay, that's a lot of money. That's some good money that you could use for whatever you want. And then the Avery Bradley situation, oh my goodness. They waived him before his contract was even guaranteed, okay? And his contract was valued at $12.9 million. And they waived him, and that saved them $10.9 million. So that way they only had to pay him $2 million. So the two waivers of Dwight Howard and Avery Bradley saved them essentially $16.6 million. Oh my gosh. That's great numbers, man. I would, if I knew that this would save me money, I would do it too, man. So the Dion Waiters situation is quite interesting, okay? So with all the gains, all the savings that the Grizzlies made over the years, there was some cost that they had to pay up, and one of them was Dion Waiters. So they had to get rid of Iguodala, and so they ended up getting Winslow and Dion Waiters. And both of them did not pan out too well for the team. And so the Grizzlies, they waived Winslow and they decided to buy out Dion Waiters. And that was the end of that. It was a failed strategy. And the Grizzlies are quite interesting because in order to position themselves for the future, they're willing to do a lot of things. And one of them is to trade up Jonas Valanciunas. Yes, you heard me right. When they traded up Jonas Valanciunas, which was a very important player for them, they traded him up for Steven Adams and Eric Bledsoe. And what that allowed them to do as well during the trade was move them up in the draft so that they could pick up Zaire Williams in the draft. And then what they did with Eric Bledsoe was quite interesting, okay? So they traded him. So they traded Eric Bledsoe for Rajon Rondo, Patrick Beverley, and Daniel Oturu. Now, Oturu was last year's 32nd pick in the draft. And what I'm guessing is that they're taking stock in him being a good young player for them in the future. And then now, with Beverley on hand, they trade up him to acquire both Jarrett Culver and Juancho Hernan-Gomez. Now, Hernan-Gomez is a bit older, and so people are suspecting that he might get bought out as well. But Culver, on the other hand, was the 6th pick in the draft in 2019. And it's quite interesting now that they have Oturu, they have Culver, and now they have Zaire Williams. And they have 3 young core players, and they got them via trades. So By taking on these players, these veteran players with huge contracts, it allows the Grizzlies to negotiate trades to where they can acquire young talent that they can then in turn invest in and for the future. And it's quite a good strategy because now those guys are going to be paired up with players like John Morant, Jaren Jackson Jr., and then you got the two Canadians. Shout out to them, Brandon Clark and Dylan Brooks. Man, this team is spicy, man. This team is looking to build something with their young core that could last for years to come. And for that, the Grizzlies have had to do a lot of deals to get to this point. And so now you have the Grizzlies essentially paving the way for a young core that could potentially be dangerous for the coming years. And I have to applaud the Grizzlies for this because this strategy is actually a pretty risky one, okay? Because you're investing yourself in guys that aren't proven yet, okay? A lot of these guys, they were picked in the draft. Some of them are high picks, but they haven't proven themselves yet. Now, I forgot to mention Tyus Jones is still in this team, and now we're beginning to see that the Grizzlies weren't messing around. And part of the reason why they're able to do this is because they're able to stay within the salary cap whilst doing all these deals and moving pieces around. Again, man, shout out to the Grizzlies because they're doing it right, honestly. And some people can say, the buyout strategy, that should be banned. We shouldn't have players be bought out this way. It's not fair. Look, these are the rules, and the Grizzlies are taking full advantage of it.